Understand what black is. The source from which all things come. The security blanket for the stars. Understand what black is. It's not a color. It's the basis of all colors. It is not a complexion. It is a reflection of all complexions called human. And out of this blackness, passion flows like a river. Feelings tell the truth. Song and dance and making you laugh are family members. Understand what black is. The breath you breathe, the sweat on your brow, the cheers and the tears balancing the world on your head. Faith is the glue that holds us all together.
You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show on WNHH LP 103.5 FM, your home for community radio.
Good morning, everyone, and good morning, good afternoon, good day. It's tomorrow in Australia, and I mention that to say that sometimes we do have a recollection of what time is and holiday season's coming up, the passage of times. But in some ways, and some people will suggest this that time is really an invention. It's an idea, and there's other ways of viewing your experience and your emotions and your cells communicating with one another above and beyond the Eastern Standard Time and Greenwich Mean Time and social political definitions. I mean, just think about it as we enter this so-called holiday season. We had this conjecture about before Christ and after Christ, and I'm always amused, Johnny, and Johnny Williams, Eric Williams is with me. Johnny is a tenured professor at Trinity, and I'll introduce him a little more, but I'm always been intrigued, Johnny, with how did the world decide to acknowledge the before Christ and after Christ delineation? I mean, we didn't have social media for one, and just for the various governments to agree worldwide to such a phenomenon. Mm-hmm. It took like 10 or so years, 10, 15 years for folks to kind of get on board, maybe even more. But anyway, it really amuses me how we've used time to kind of define ourselves. And sometimes that definition is really subject to bias, et cetera, et cetera. And so, Johnny, I wanted to kind of kick off with us kind of talking as you're being chair of the sociology department at Trinity, as well as a tenured professor. And folks, the reason I mentioned tenured is folks, I don't think understand not the symbolism, but the substance of what tenured means. So let me get to the point, Johnny. If you had not been tenured in your earlier days, your earlier academic careers, would you be as outspoken then as you are now?
Well, often I get asked that question, especially by new assistant professors saying, "Oh, you have tenure, and that's why you're speaking out." But that's simply not so. Throughout my career in the Academy of Higher Education in the United States, I have spoken out clearly, directly, in very raw terms to a lot of people, I think. Beginning in my undergrad years at Ouachita Baptist University in Arkadelphia, Arkansas, all the way through my graduate years at Brandeis University. Anybody who knows me know that I am not afraid to use my voice to do what I consider to be the right thing to do by people, right? The fact is that tenure for me as a Black individual in the predominantly white higher education arena is no guarantee that I would be fired or dismissed anyway. I mean, it's just that there are different standards. I wrote about this in a piece for the Journal of Academic Freedom for AAUP. And that is that there's an academic double standard. Usually when folk who are challenging the narrative and challenging power to try to transform the society to work for the whole of society, not just a few, uh, those few get very upset and want you to, to kowtow to their narrative that they occupy these positions of power by legitimate means, which they do not.
Hmm.
And so tenure is no guarantee of anything. Matter of fact, Tom, I must say, completely honest with you, I always got my bags packed. I could be gone in a moment's notice from these institutions. So, to say that one has tenure, yeah, okay, it gives me some protection, but the protection is minimal. It is not, as people seem to think that, oh, he can't be let go or fired or anything like that. We've seen this to be the case with other professors like Ward Churchill, who, if you remember, after 9/11, say that the folks in the Ivory Tower who passed were really little Eichmanns anyway. So and basically, people misunderstood what he was saying. He was basically saying that uh, that the capitalist system has reproduced these people who, using the rationale of capitalism, the logic of capitalism, especially white supremacist capitalism, to perpetuate this kind of death accumulation. That is, they're actually engaging in the killing of people for things, for material accumulation. And so that was misunderstood. He was fired by the state he was fired by the state of Colorado, from the University of Colorado. There's been other instances of people too. That's just one who speak out. I mean, look, Stephen Salida had tenure. He was from Virginia Tech. He was going to University of Illinois. Even before he got there, they rescinded his job offer. Now he's not in the academy. So, I mean, that's no guarantee of protection because of what he said on social media about Palestine and, what about Israel treatment of Palestinians and so forth, right? So it's really it's just really problematic to think that you should have tenure before you speak. If you don't talk before you have tenure, you're never gonna talk anyway. You're never gonna speak out. You're never gonna do the right thing. That's the way I see it too.
Share a little bit, just as you were talking, Johnny, in terms of I know the gentleman as Cornell West. You know him as Corn. So
Yeah.
just bring people up to date a little bit, just briefly, even in terms of that situation of his having to choosing to move to Union.
Choosing, I mean, I don't know. I mean, basically, because he supports the right of humanity, that is the right for people to be. Hold on just a second, Tom. Let me turn this off. It's that because he supports the right of people. Well, it's because he supports Palestinian rights and the right for people to be treated humanely, right, and to not to be genocide, as which the Israelis are doing to the Palestinians, as which the Americans have done to Native Americans, as they have done to Black folk. These are racial capitalist systems and capitalist logics that kill people, right, for land, for the resources on the land. So corn basically was being pushed out by Harvard University, not given the tenure that he had already earned at Harvard anyway, but say, we're not going to bring you in with tenure, we're going to put you in a contract position. Now, this stuff is all related to the nature of the academy right now as it is, because 70% of the people who are working in the academy are contingent faculty. They work part-time. They get paid between $3,000 to $5,000 to teach a course of, say, 40 people, maybe if you have a big university, maybe 100 people. And they got to teach 5 classes or so forth at different universities. They may be doing that. So it's really a bad situation, right? But Cohen isn't contingent. He had tenure. Tenure is supposedly follow you wherever you go once you get it. In this instance, Harvard refused to give it to him because of what he was saying about the Israelis and Zionism and supporting Palestinians.
And that kind of leads me, and I appreciate you sharing that, because we had talked a little bit prior to the show about this term, and I still am intrigued by this term where you mentioned academic mercenaries, and my mind goes to the American Revolution, where we had mercenaries that helped us.
The Hessians, yeah.
So the term is not unique to academia, but I haven't really heard it ever applied as often and as cogently as you have. So elaborate on that in terms of this academic mercenary construct that you
I mean, there was a colleague who's still alive right now, Adolph Reed Jr., who wrote a piece back in I think it was in the 1990s, about public intellectuals, right? And what their role truly is. Well, his idea of public intellectuals because he's still alive, is that these are people who report back to the powerful about what's going on in the community so that they won't upset the domination that the powerful are meting out towards everyday people, right? Well, this is the same thing that academic mercenaries do, but in another kind of way. They make money because what they're interested in is the money. I mean, they really have this capitalist logic going on, right? So they get paid off for basically deflecting and misdirecting the people, the narrative about how oppression works, right? These systems of oppression, particularly in this instance, white supremacy, how it actually worked. They individualize a system process. And what I mean by that, white racism is a collective action. It's not an individual bigot so far, right? You know, as far as I know, right? I can't remember this author's, the guy who coined this phrase, made this euphemism. He said that it's not the sharks, it's the water that we should be looking at, right? Mm. The shark is the bigot, right? And that's what people focus. They don't focus on the system that make the shark possible, right? And that's what we should be. Academic mercenaries deflect you from that and talk about how you can basically ameliorate the individual white person who is practicing white racism on a daily basis. And that's not where our focus should be. I'm not concerned so much about whether or not somebody's a racist or not. I'm concerned about the system that make them possible and that give them license to act in support of the system itself. Academic mercenaries don't do that. So they then prolong the suffering and the death and destruction of white supremacy capitalism.
Unpack the thought, the provocative thought you just articulated about nature versus nurture, and environment versus individuals. And the system is still, and I'm not trying to be argumentative, the system is still is controlled, managed by individuals, correct?
Correct.
Or are you suggesting that artificial intelligence is taking over racist artificial?
No, I'm not suggesting any of that. What I'm trying to get you to see is, I'm a sociologist, so we call it just the sociological imagination. That's an interaction between the individual and the structures, the system itself. We create these systems, but these systems in turn also create us. We internalize the values, the beliefs, the customs, and so forth, and take them on as our own. And we just practice it, and we make the system go, which is us, as you said, right? And so how do you then change that kind of behavior and internalization of these logics, these white supremacist logics, these capitalist logics, right? How do you transform that? How do you get inside somebody's head to do that? You do that by transforming the system, which would then transform the culture, which we imbibe and internalize as our own, right? That's how you do it, right? But nobody want to talk about the system, because the system is basically grounded and vested in giving some people all the material gain, giving some others some of the material gain, and then a little bit of crumbs to people at the bottom to maintain itself, right? By giving people that. I mean, it's just like this diversity, equity, and inclusion farce that's going on all around in corporations and the academy. It's not designed to transform these institutions into places that are humane, but actually to deflect, right? To misdirect attention, to help people misrecognize that the system is actually, that these institutions are part of this system of oppression. And integral to it, I might add, to reinforce this oppression and to bring these people out, these folks who are like, they may be Black, they may be Latino, they may be Asian, right? But to get them to think just like the people who are doing the oppression, to have them to fit, so they can also then reproduce that oppression and not see it as a problem. It's a level of self-hatred, as Fanon would say, right? Amilcar Cabral talks about this a lot when he talks about the role of culture, right? And this is important, is that it is through the culture that you change the mindset of the people. The revolution occurs here first, right? Then your action starts to change, and you start to change these systems, and you empower yourself. But a lot of people don't get that, though. It's backwards in the United States. They're trying to transform individuals without changing the cultural smog, as you will, around them that envelops them, right? You can't do that without changing these systems, though.
You in terms of the and I really appreciate that clarification. You've been swimming in the pool of academia for the oceans and even titanic oceans for several decades, 30 plus decades.
Yeah.
If this was 2032, 10 years from now or so, 2022 is next.
Mhm.
Uh, and I stepped on Trinity's campus. What would Trinity still be there? What would I stepped into the whoever was teaching sociology. Would even sociology be taught in 2022, 2032? How would the campus change? Do me like a little mind experiment. When you dream about what Trinity might look like, those buildings, will there be a building named after you?
Of course not.
But in 2032, excuse me, 2032, what will the campus look like, and will there even be a campus?
I mean, look, I don't like to like predict outward, but given the historical record, Trinity College itself was like Brown, Yale, and the rest of them in the United States, created to facilitate slavery. It was a ground for. It was basically established to facilitate slavery and genocide against Native folk, right? And train people into that logic and facilitate that commerce. Basically, it was commerce for them because we were just commodities as Black people, right? And natives had the land, so they were trying to make them white. These kinds of places, right? What would it look like given that history and the history that we're currently in now? It'll look pretty much the same, except for it may be, Tom, and this is the most frightening part of it all, that it may be that the people who are doing the oppression and who are now identifying, well, I don't know if they should, phenotypically, they may not look the way we think of white people as beige people look, right? But they will have the whiteness mindset. And they will be Black, they will be Latino, they will be Asian with money, and they will continue to use the racial capitalist logic to exploit people around the world. It'll still be the same.
So let's explore that a little bit, and I appreciate your transparency and your honesty about your feelings, because we do see in the last year the ascendancy of people becoming Black and brown people becoming presidents of universities and chairs of departments and deans, et cetera. I'm curious about your students. If you say that do you get the sense of optimism that some of your students, your undergraduate students and graduate students, are feeling more different about how they want to plot their path for if not revolution, at least reconstruction?
No, the students that we get at this university, at this college rather, pretty much on the same kind of thinking line as the previous generation of cohorts of students who come in. They're concerned about grades, status, not learning. They want to acquire the material things that everybody else has in their particular class group. They're actually scared of change, scared to change the world, not in their interest.
And again, I want people to know that you're not saying that every student in college at this point in time on 11/20 on the 17th is of that feeling, but the emotional aspect of being intimidated by the circumstances, that resonates with me. And I elaborate a little bit. When you say scared, do you see them? How do you how do they evince their being intimidated or frightful or hesitant?
When I teach the classes that I teach, I just taught racism class. It was probably one of the most devastating experiences I ever had teaching a racism class at this college. The students were silent. And even though participation was really a part of it, had one or two students who talked, but most of them remained silent. And that speaks volumes about how seriously they took the issue of racism itself in the United States and around the world. They don't take it seriously. They don't read. I'm just talking about my class now. They didn't read. They expected to be spoon-fed what they think are answers when there are no answers. There's a lot of gray. and it's up to them to figure out the direction the world should go in once they leave here. I'm just trying to get them to think critically about the world. But they don't even want to think critically about the world, even at this supposedly prestigious institution. They just want to live their lives and to be undisturbed and not being concerned about the multiple wars that the United States is fighting to get these this cobalt and lithium and all this other kind of stuff that we need for technology. They're not even concerned about that. They're not even concerned about war because they don't serve in the military. They leave that to poor people around the country to do that. So, I mean, they are scared when, I know they're very frightened when I start talking about systems and their role and their complicity in it. And all of Americans' roles in complicity in these systems of oppression. Because, I mean, if you just look at the history of it all, the United States itself is a gigantic corporation. I mean, it exists to facilitate, and the Constitution exists to facilitate profit making. And to make that point to them, they don't want to accept that because they see themselves as being the problem. And they don't want to see themselves as being the problem. And how do you get past that? How do you get students to think critically about the world and saying there's another way to do this? We don't have to do it using capitalism. There are other ways that we can do this around the world. People have provided examples of this. Even within our own country, there are ways that we can do this differently and not harm people.
I want to jump to bell hooks in a second, but I just want to kind of stay on the observation that you've just rendered, and it's an astute observation in my mind, and how it intersects with sociology. I know that you have some concerns about the definition of sociology and sociology departments. Will the field still exist in the future, or I know you're working on, if not abolishing sociology or creating new sociology. So just talk about that.
Well, I mean, what I'm exploring is what I did before. The book before the one that I'm doing now is called Decoding Racial Ideology and Genomics, and in that book I looked at the role of basically racial logics, whiteness logics, and so forth, and genomics, right, and how people make sense of genes and how they apply it and stuff like that, by interviewing people who are geneticists and genomists. And we see that stuff being played out is still racialized. Well, sociology is no different. Sociology, like science, came into existence to support budding colonialism, right, and enslavement. Really, sociology came into existence to basically justify the enslavement of African people, right, which most sociologists don't even think about. Anyway, so that's that history part of it. And then the way sociologists approach it, like a good friend of mine, Ronaldo Wolcott, who's at the University of Toronto, made it plain in a piece they wrote about Sociology Failed, is that sociologists approach people who are oppressed as subjects, not as people who to collaborate with, to try to create change necessary to so that the species can survive, because the planet's going to be here. The species are going to be gone. Like the dinosaurs are gone, the humans will be gone if we don't correct ourselves, right? So sociology, too, is a part of the reproduction of whiteness, of white racism, the systems of oppression and class, and so forth, through if you go look at any of the supposedly highfalutin journals of sociology, like the American Sociological Review, Social Problems, and so forth, none of the stuff that they're offering is pretty much, and I'm saying probably 99.9% of the stuff that they're publishing isn't about creating change. It's about careerism and advancing these professors' own kind of ego when it comes to what they're looking at in the sense of self-importance and stuff. It's not about transforming the world for the rest of humanity to making this place better so that human beings can survive. So sociology continues to be a part of that, just like any other science is. All the social sciences pretty much are like this. The humanities too, right? But you find a few people who are trying to lay out roadmaps to get us where we need to go in order to survive as a species on this planet. But those folks are few and far between, and they don't get published in the mainstream so-called white-dominated journals. That's what I mean by mainstream. They don't get published in those white-dominated journals. There are gatekeeping that goes on with the editors and so forth to keep that information out of there, to help perpetuate these systems of domination that the United States is a part of and continue to perpetuate. That's what's going on. And sociology is a part of it too.
And so where do you find, when you get up each day, to still feel legitimate and honest in yourself, to be involved with a department with a field of discipline as you describe it, that is negative?
Where do I get the strength to carry on? Well, I'm gonna give you a quote from James Baldwin. I mean, as long as I'm alive, I have to be optimistic, right? I'm breathing, right? So I'm a human being. I think that we can find a way to overcome our destructive nature with this system that we created called capitalism, that the Europeans primarily created it, and it dominates the world now. We have the diversity of this planet when it comes to the life that's on it, right, dictates to me that we will find our way out, that we can survive. Hubris and arrogance, in many ways, we can survive this, but we got to be willing to prioritize doing that. So far, we have not been willing to do that. There's been people in the wind who are blowing out in the wind, out in the wilderness, rather, saying, we need to change course, we need to do it this way and so forth, but those people have been assassinated. You get Walter Rodney, you get Malcolm X, you get Fannie Lou Hamer, who wasn't assassinated, but basically, died in obscurity, basically because, of what happened in the 1960s. You get other people who are important, who are not really put out in front of the people to get us to see how we can live another way, right? That is prosperous for all humanity, but we can all come up together. There's no need for poverty, but we have it because of capitalism. Capitalism depends on inequality, right? And it does so in a way that creates these divisions. As Ruth Gilmore says, capitalism depends on inequality, but race enshrines it, right? The categories of race and racism, it enshrines this stuff. So it creates these divisions so it can exploit people in hierarchical ways. We can't survive. I'm an optimist, Tom. Antonio Gramsci is famous for saying, pessimism of the intellect. I give you the history, the record, but I have the optimism, of the will, right? And that's where I am. And so I get up every morning thinking that the world, I'm fortunate to be alive, right? Because, at any moment, as Black individuals in this society, we could be gone, but the fact is while I'm alive, I'm going to speak what I consider to be my truth and the truth of the knowledge that I have gathered as a social scientist to the people, even if they don't want to hear it. They have to hear it. Because it's unfair to them and it's unfair to me if I don't give them exactly what I think is happening, right? But some people take that as being threatening. In fact, like I told you, my class was threatened by it all because it's hard to take.
I want to talk about bell hooks, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, go ahead.
But before we go to bell, and again, the desire, although you've been on the show before, every time it's like a new beginning for me. And I say that in a new beginning, meaning a new refreshed way. And as the year kind of winds down, I'm sure it gets in this past year, there's been people that you've known personally and people that you've just known from their status in the world that are no longer with us. And bell hooks comes to mind. Greg Tate recently comes to mind, and then your good friend with the Black Agenda Report.
Glenn Ford,
Glenn Ford. And any comments about that? Because all of them are like around the same age group and get a little younger than you, and I'm older than most of them. But it's a blessing, as you say, to still have this. Not face to face, but face to face through Zoom, because every day is a blessing. Yeah. But any thoughts about that in terms of Bell or Greg Tate or?
First time I heard of Bell Hooks was actually, and the first time I met her was at Brandeis University. I was a grad student in 1990. What was it? 1986. 1986 when I met her. And she was a breath of fresh air to me because she was, you know, I mean, she was someone who I looked up to in terms of the way she spoke, the narrative that she gave when she spoke to students, spoke to faculty, and during that time period, she was doing a lot of cussing, right? I mean, in her talk, and I do a lot of cussing and talking too. So when I give talks to people, I'm going to use some curse words, right? And I was like, damn, I can do that. This is fantastic. And so I was impressed with that. Then I read Breaking Bread. I read other things by her, Cornel West and her in conversation. That's how I got turned on to her. And my professor at Brandeis University, Jackie Alexander, who actually, exposed me to the stuff in the racism class and stuff like that, who was hard on me because I was so problematic when I was younger, like with my logics and stuff. But I really, Jackie was somebody who I really respected. She taught me a lot, right? She taught me a lot, and I'm still learning, right? And that we're all interconnected, right? And this is what Glenn Ford was like for me too. Glenn was a humble guy. We talked. Whenever I talked to him, we would talk for hours, talking about stuff, and he'd be educating me, man. I was like, man, you educated me. He felt like because he didn't have a credential, that he wasn't educating anybody. I was like, you educated me. So about how these things work, because the dude read a lot. He read as much as any PhD would. So I would say that Glenn has a PhD in streetology. So, but also just PhD politically from experience.
Again, and
he
so
and I both.
The Black Agenda
Black Agenda Report. Yeah,
and
Glenn
who's
Ford.
carried on? You mentioned who's not filling Glenn's shoes, but trying to still keep the path.
Margaret Kimberly.
So really recommend that people still go to Black Agenda.
Yeah, I recommend that people go to Black Agenda Report and read them when they put their stuff out Tuesday, maybe Wednesday for the week. There's always good stuff on there that'll challenge you to see the world in a different kind of way than what you're being fed, because what we're being fed is nonsense. So I would recommend that. I also would recommend counterpunch.org to watch them. And when Washington Babylon was operational, I don't know if Silverstein still has his up, but Washington Babylon was pretty good too. So you can go read that. But the thing is, all of these people having gone on at this early age tells you how much stress there is trying to do this kind of work, right? And all of us need therapy, right? I believe in therapy, and I'm engaged in it all the time. So
let's jump to that for a second, because some folks may not know, and that in the 2015, 2016, 2017, you're on your face, your quote, your videos. Reporters are using or intoning your name, be it from Fox News to CNN to NBC to CBS, the local stations, to the Hartford Courant, about your things that you've just shared with me in such an honest and compassionate and loving way, in terms of individual responsibility, individual identity, and are we really killing ourselves because of our lack of trying to aspire to be better? But as a result of as a result of that kind of situation, you just alluded that you're currently, I still see the benefit of therapy and talking to somebody. And I mention that because I'm involved with a number of groups, and I've noticed a number of healing groups, healing circles, et cetera, kind of emerging for people to finally recognize that we're a delicate, we may not be as delicate as a flower, but we may be more delicate as a flower, as a species. So, but you still find it useful to kind of pursue the, what we quote unquote call therapy.
Therapy is good. When I was growing up, the therapist was the preacher, right? And then the Ursha board and places like that my mom and dad would go to, because they would commune with those folk, right? Yeah. And talk about their day and what they were going through. And they found unity in that and support, right? And the same thing with therapy. Nowadays we're paying people to go to get therapy. Some people can't afford to go, but still, you need therapy. And it should be mental illness and depression is very problematic, and it shouldn't be stigmatized. Living in this country, especially if you're Black, black woman, black man, death is our constant companion, right? It is never going away, right? And knowing that it's our companion, we try to live our full lives despite it all, but it takes a toll, right? And especially when, say, you talk about what happened in 2017, when you have the media of corporations that are into sensationalism because of the way Pulitzer organized this narrative and the sensationalizing to sell newspapers way back in the early 20th century, late 19th century, right? They still use that narrative to get people to come to this, and they'll misinterpret what you're saying and say these things about you to vilify you in a way, right? And now they call it, cancel culture. But I'm like, I can't remember who said this. It's not really cancel culture per se when it comes to these people who are spouting violence and stuff like that. It's really consequences, right? Consequence culture. I can't remember who said that though. But but the fact is that they have the ability to paint you to be this kind of devil, this hater of people, right? And so you got to be leery of how it is that social media constructs you, especially, Twitter is a wild, wild west, right? Even though I like it. But it can also create all kinds of problems, misinterpretation, because it's in writing. And Facebook and so forth, Facebook is very problematic. I'm thinking about leaving it, but then there is, the print media and the visual media, right, and how they project you and the images that they project and misinterpret. To as I go back to the academic mercenary thing, it is their job to deflect. That's what they do, right? From the central concern. Because if you look at what I was talking about whiteness and white supremacy, right? Systems. But they boiled it down to he hates white people. He wants to see them die, right? And that's the misinterpretation, right? In order to get you not to think about systems that are really costing everybody in the United States longevity.
Yes.
And productivity in terms of just giving back to people, right? And so you need someone to talk to. And the way I do it is therapy, but also community, right? People in the community, not in the academy. The academy the Academy of Higher Education is cutthroat. I'm not going to lie to you about that. People are fighting over petty stuff that doesn't really matter, right? But the stuff that's important, they don't want to have nothing to say about it. They go silent, right? So and people are fighting about, oh, you got a raise? Oh, I want some more money too, but I see that as a problem because you got a raise. I want to get that, right? It's that kind of thing in the academy, right? It's not about how can I stop people from dying from police violence? How can we abolish the police and have a different kind of way of safety in the community? None of that, right? It's all about that stuff. That kind of mental kind of mess up that goes on, right, in their heads. Most of the academia and the academics who are in it are concerned not with solving problems per se. That's not their job. They're concerned with the propagandizing of the people. That's what they do. And it's hard to be in this arena. I kid you not. It's hard. But I'm here because I need to be here. Right? Because if I'm not here, just think what's going to happen to people who can't. At least I get one or two students to hear me.
Yes.
Right? Or one or two colleagues maybe. But damn, if I'm not here or somebody like me at other institutions are not there, ain't nobody hearing you. So that's what I would say. But you need support, though. Community support is everything. That's what got me through 2017.
Well, and now we're in the 2022. It's time is moving. Your thoughts about the mental challenges, that the daily ups and downs, and this word depression is used so uniformly, but it takes on an individual impact on how people even internalize the word and whether it even has a reality for them. And when you mention the morbidity issue, it seems to me in the media about a year ago, and then maybe 6 weeks ago, was the newscast about how COVID has decreased the lifespan of Black and Brown people. And so whether or not you even believe that as an individual, just we're bombarded by media attacks. I call them word bombs that drop on us daily. So again, that's another reason I'm really glad we could kind of end up the year kind of chatting together. We have about 20 minutes I want to give you, or 15 minutes rather, I want to give you the chance for us to explore any new topics or things that you might want to elaborate on, or how the spirit might be moving you at this particular point in time.
Well, I just want to talk about 2022. 2022 has been a rough year. I think, well, a lot of Americans, especially poor Americans, who never stopped working during this pandemic, which is ongoing. Some people walking around here thinking it is done. It is mentally tough. It's mentally tough on me, my family, to try to figure out, how to be safe in a media-saturated society that is full of disinformation. And I mean, say with this new variant, the Omicron variant, which is highly contagious, but it appears that it's not, at least reports from folks I know in South Africa, is that, people are recovering from it. They're not dying from it. But it is highly contagious, though. And now it's running through campuses like Cornell University, Northeastern University in Boston, right? And they're shutting down and going remote. Just what will happen next semester? That will be mentally problematic, right? It's also problematic that while we're dying from the variant, poor people, Black people, the people who are usually oppressed, health oppressed, right? Because we don't have access to decent health care. We don't have a national healthcare system. I mean, how are we going to survive this? I mean, look, there's a lot of mentally wounded people. I see them in my classroom, right? They're suffering right now, right? At the college, right? Professors are suffering around the country and really North America, right? Yet nobody is, even the professors, now I'll digress a little bit, even the professors themselves who are suffering from this are expected to work as if nothing is wrong, right? Just as the essential workers are doing that, professors are doing that, right? It takes a tremendous toll on the professors in the classroom too, right? So this stuff is, then you get on top of that, you got people just dying, right?
Right.
And we've always died at a very young age. A good friend of mine's, when I got to Trinity College, his name was Jerry G. Watts, right? Political scientist. He left Trinity because it was such a horrible place to him. He went to Cooney Graduate Center. And he died at 62 years old. This was way before COVID. 62 years old, right? We don't even get to 65, right?
Yeah.
It's a miracle, right? And so we got that on top of us. And then if we do get to 65, we go with all these comorbidities, right? That we have to be on all these drugs and stuff just to survive. So 2022, it seems like it's the worst version of 2021 when the virus first came on the scene, right? 2020 rather, right? So, I just want people to know that it's okay to engage in self-care and it's okay to say, I can't take this today.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
So you let your boss know, hey, look, I need a mental break. It's stressing, right?
And you mentioned also the reports of the dramatic reports of in the school systems, K through 12, the number of teachers that are no longer returning and the teacher shortages. The Yale Alumni Journal, and again, I'm not doing this show to just emphasize the somberness, but also the reality and some inspiration. But the Yale Alumni Journal had an article about 4 years ago of the class of 68, 69 Black guys that came into Yale at that point, and how many had passed away since that time.
I remember that article. Yeah.
And I laugh because I'm from that cohort and know some of the folks. But it's important for us as elders, so to speak, to kind of get, as you say, we got to share this information for those people that might be listening, the new generations. We do need change. Greg Tate, are you up? Was he someone that was close?
No, I didn't know him as well because though I do cultural sociology stuff, I didn't do too much of the pop culture stuff. So I didn't know him that well, but I know he was influential, and a lot of people are going to miss him. like I said, I mean, he's gone. Others are gone. There's a whole bunch of people who are unnamed that are gone
Yes.
from this year, and you know, it's. I mean, it gets you to thinking about your own mortality.
Yeah.
You know, and
go
go
ahead. I put on Facebook this morning to remind people of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in terms of death and dying, because you don't hear her name anymore. But I was able to find a video where Oprah interviewed her when Oprah was at a radio station in Baltimore, and it was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's last interview, because she was actually dying during the process of. I mean, it was diagnosed, but I really urge people to kind of, in terms of death and dying, to kind of check out Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And she goes into various stages of dying, as well as the mysticism about life after death. So not to be ideological, but she puts enough out there in terms of the public sphere for you to really think about and to match your imagination with her beliefs.
Yeah, but you know, also, Tom, though, it is also, I think the Yale article that you just cited could also be related to the fact that academia put especially at predominantly white institutions, right, put Black, Latino, and Asian and Indigenous faculty through a lot. And why it is that we don't live that long, because of the stress of being in this environment. Look, the academy is hostile territory to oppressed people. It is very hostile. It is a violent place. I kid you not. I mean, I want to stress this for your listeners out there. Any kind of like utopian ideas you have about the academy, let them go. The academy is a part of the oppressive process. It is a very violent place. Daily, people like us experience mental anguish and violence that affects us physically within these institutions, right? People don't talk about that. They just say, oh, he's got these credentials or she's got these credentials and they're doing fine and they're making a little money. And even that, we're not making as much as our white counterparts are making. That inequality there, right? And how we're treated, right? Some of us are being talked to in ways in which I wouldn't talk to a dog, right? And then if you come back at these people in this way and say, you don't speak to me that way, they say you got the problem and that you're being aggressive and that you're the bully, when they themselves are doing that. So these places kill us too, okay, just so you know, okay? It isn't what people think it is, right? Just as a society is a big, gigantic death machine of capitalism that kills people for profit, these institutions are a part of that process too, okay? And they try to kill off any critical thinking in your head to challenge what is happening to you, to try to make you appear that somehow you're the nut, right? You're the one that got the problem, when in actuality, it's they who have the problem, right? In that system that they're dealing with, right? I mean, well, I kid you not.
As far as I'm concerned, Johnny, you're still a Brazil nut. As far as you're a Brazil nut. You're a cashew nut. You got all the varieties.
Well, I mean, I don't mean to disparage mentally ill people. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying that
we're all mentally ill to some degree. I think you're saying.
Well, I mean, I think the United States is full of mentally ill people. Man, people thinking that the best way to get to satisfy their immiseration, that is their misery, is by wealth accumulation and buying things. We consume, and yet we're miserable. We're very miserable.
So wrap that into some of the lectures you've given in terms of Thorsten Veblen, right? I mean, Veblen from the 1900s, Thorsten Veblen.
Conspicuous consumption, right? Yeah.
So wrap that into. I mean, your field has been trying to send these early warning signals to society, the good folks in your field for some time.
Thorsten Veblen was actually ran out of the academy, because of what he was saying about how it is that capitalism works. Now, he didn't say it exactly like capitalism, anything like that, but he's saying that people are basically developing a mentality of accumulating things and thinking that they can derive some relationship from them. That is, they really believe that the commodification of the world will bring them solace, when it just brings them misery, death, and destruction.
And remind
right?
people when Veblen was alive. I mean, we're talking about the 1900s. I mean,
Yeah,
1900s.
what late 1900s, early 20th century.
20th century. So you didn't have TVs. I mean, radio still hadn't even been invented. Cars were
No.
just were hazards. So what was even perceived to be of comfort value, even for him to kind of have this astute vision just then.
Well, I mean, because he was railing against the fact that when we look at these academic institutions, who sits on the board? They're capitalists, right? And Carnegie and the Rockefellers and all these people sit on these boards and stuff, and they want a narrative, a logic that support them accumulating wealth in these great proportion, billions and billions of dollars, almost trillion now for one capitalist named Bezos, right?
Yeah.
But the fact is that they didn't like that, so they didn't want to give him tenure, right? But he kept talking. See, we started off talking about you need tenure, but tenure, there's no guarantee or anything, right? So you need to speak your voice, right? And he kept speaking, talking about how this will eventually lead to problems for the country, right?
Yes.
And we are here, right?
Yes.
We have global climate change, and it's here, right? Despite we being warned way back in the 1970s about global climate change, everybody chose to make more and more money and leave it to future generations to deal with, right? So sociologists then, at least some of us, I mean, why don't we just say maybe 10 of us, you can count them on your hand, right? Maybe doing some good work, right? But a vast majority of us, no. We got a bunch of people who are not, I mean, they're too busy broadcasting, doing self-promotion about themselves and their books and all this other kind of stuff. They're not concerned with everyday people and collaborating with everyday people to help transform the world, to work in unison with as equals with everyday people. That doesn't occur in the Academy of Higher Education in the United States.
We have about 2 more minutes, and Harry will play the music to kind of kick us off, and hopefully we can rejoin in next year and kind of chat a little bit. But on Monday, are you still? What's your academic schedule this second semester, so to speak? Or
I'll be in all every day except for Friday, but I'm around. I'm chairing, man. I got a whole bunch of administrative work to do. It's a lot of work.
I'll reach out to you again. And before Harry kind of plays the music, on a kind of a trivia note, someone that's played pickleball would understand Trinity's would know Trinity's prowess in terms of national athletic competitions. Someone that plays tennis probably knows about Trinity's prowess in terms of racket sports, and someone that might even play badminton. But it's really unique that Trinity's been a national leader. I'm going to leave my audience to kind of find out the answer to this, how Trinity has won national championships for a number of years in a particular NCAA sport. But again, it feeds into my mind to the prep school syndrome and the East Coast oligarchy syndrome and kind of the elitist syndrome. So it's always amusing how Trinity has been able to have its claim, because we know about the Yukon Huskies, but people should also know about Trinity. I'll see you on the squash court. I'll see you on the squash court soon.
All right. Peace.
Understand what black is. The source from which all things come. Security blanket for the stars.
This is Harry Droz, and you're listening to WNHHLP 103.5 FM New Haven.
It is not a complexion. It is a reflection of all complexions called human. And out of this blackness, passion flows like a river. Feelings tell the truth. Song and dance and making you laugh are family members.